Okay. Rahul, I'd rather you join our conversation and worry about your question later at this point. That's okay with you.
Yeah, I have just started the question. I don't know if it's visible to you.
Well, that's fine. It will be good. Yeah, we'll get the rest of it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Stefan's question because, well, uh, he's not going to be able to attend, and I'm hoping that Gunnar will be able to join us. So I'm going to take Stefan's question first. So Stefan says, I'm practicing between stage 3 and 4, and so far, I've never fallen asleep during any meditation. I'm wondering whether this is a sign that I'm not having sufficient stable attention. You state stable attention would be a requirement for drowsiness. I didn't quite say that, Stefan, but that's all right. I'll maybe come back to that. It's close enough. I sure do have the feeling that I experience subtle dullness, but rather as a precursor to my forgetting the breath and not as a precursor to falling asleep. That is right on. I believe that I'm a very alert person in general. Maybe that will help you interpreting my observation. And you please give me some advice. Like, I would be very thankful to hear whether there is something that I should improve, work on, or just continue with stage 3 and 4 practices. Well, yes, sometimes there are some people who don't experience dullness as much so as others. And some people, it doesn't come till later on. Uh, as you well know, there are some people that just seem to be very high energy by nature and are much less prone to dullness. And you say that you how do you describe yourself here? I'm a very alert person in general. So I think you've identified yourself as being in that category. Uh, Usually there is the mind system, the collective of the mind in its untrained, relatively untrained state, quickly gets bored with a single object of attention. So it tends to either dullness or distraction. Um, so what I really meant to convey there is that practicing to stabilize attention can often trigger dullness, but it's not exactly a prerequisite to dullness. Uh, you may not experience this because so much because of the kind of person you are, but for most of us, if we're in a relatively dull state for whatever reason, health, lack of sleep, just cumulative effects of a lot of things can produce this. And it actually just comes on by itself given the opportunity. You sit down, relatively relaxed state to meditate, and that dullness that you've been fighting off up to that point uh, is going to tend to overwhelm you. Um, you say you experience subtle dullness, but as a precursor to forgetting the breath. This is pretty normal because the main thing that happens with dullness and the main thing that happens with stabilizing the breath are two opposing tendencies. Stability of attention, whether this is provided for in the instructions to meditate or not, is always dependent upon an increased awareness of what's happening in your own mind. That kind of introspective awareness that informs the mind that what you were doing is not consistent with what you had intended to do. And so we're cultivating that from the very beginning with just by feeling good when we've realized that our mind is doing something that we hadn't intended to do. So uh, to increase the level of your awareness, your alertness, is actually a necessary part of developing a true stable of attention. Now, there's another way that people can coerce the mind into a sort of stability of attention through actually shutting down mental processes in a very, to become very focused on a single thing. That tends to plummet us into dullness very quickly. With dullness, awareness contracts. With contraction of awareness, dullness arises. Do you see the relationship there? Uh, to have to have focused awareness, or not focused awareness, I'm sorry, my languaging is off. To have powerful awareness is to have less dullness. It's to be more fully conscious, right? So dullness can cause the contraction of awareness, or a contraction of awareness in order to try to concentrate can can induce a dullness. So it's, either way, it's the subtle dullness is going to be something that tends to come in. In stage 4, you can actually recognize this and appreciate it enough that as long as the stable dullness, or as long as the subtle dullness is sufficiently stable, it will actually help you to sustain your attention at that level. Okay? Only at that level, because the very first thing we do in stage 5 is we want to move beyond that stable, subtle dullness, right? So in stage 4, you're looking out for stable, subtle dullness that becomes progressive. And I think that that's what you're referring to there. And it may be that your level of conscious power that you're bringing to your meditation is higher than the average person in those early stages, which is good, which is good. It will benefit you. You still may experience some dullness later on, so don't be surprised at that. Now, regardless, there is going to be a tendency of the mind until it becomes more unified, more appreciative of the value of meditation, and more unified around the intent to carry out the practice in an appropriate way. There's going to be a tendency for parts of the mind system to exhibit what I referred to as kind of a boredness, state of being bored with this activity compared to doing something that's either more interesting or just, letting go and going into a state of dullness. So, and so that's why you see that there's a kind of subtle dullness that can really lead to gross distractions and potentially forgetting. Hopefully that's clear. In terms of the last part of your question, I would just simply say, keep on doing what you're doing. Be aware of these things, incorporate them, the intention to recognize these factors more clearly. To what degree there is some part of your mind is finding the process a bit tedious and wants to go chasing after other more appealing focuses of attention, producing distraction and maybe forgetting. Be aware likewise of the tendency for the mind to just take this opportunity and be relaxed, and this by itself, holding this attention, is of course going to enhance your introspective awareness of both distraction and attention. So just go ahead and continue working with stage 3, stage 4 practices. And of course, when you have periods of relative stability of attention and where you don't have the progressive dullness that in your case won't lead to it won't lead to strong dullness, but it will lead to increased distraction and possibly forgetting. So bring that into your intentions, make that part of your practice, and the power of your conscious awareness will only increase when you have longer periods of stability attention and non-progressive subtle dullness. go ahead and begin doing stage 5 practices in those periods. And what do I mean by that? Just to clarify, if you've been experiencing periods of 10 minutes or so, let's just say that's not a firm number, but something in that neighborhood, more or less. If you've been experiencing periods like that where you don't have this increased distraction, you don't have this increased dullness, then go ahead and do the stage 5 practices. Get yourself familiar with the stage 5 practices. There's no reason that you need to confine yourself to stage 3 and 4 practices. Make it stage 3 and 4, or 3, 4, and 5 as appropriate. Okay? Anybody else want to expand on that question or answer either one? Okay. Pretty straightforward meditation question. Rahul, since Gunner's not here yet, would you like to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, and if people refresh their screens or refresh the Patreon page, you can see his question.
Okay, I'll refresh mine.
Yeah, just reload it. It should pop up.
Wonderful. Of course, now I have to scroll down until I find the right. Oh, here we go. No, I still don't see. Oh, there it is. Just showed up. Okay, thanks. No, that's funny. I no longer see Gunner's question. Anyway, I see yours, Rahul. So go ahead. You say you've been meditating using TMI for around 4 years now. But you find yourself stuck in stage 3 to 4. Been able to maintain good extrospective awareness very early, but I'm not able to get a steady introspective awareness going on. I do practice walking meditation before my sit almost every day, generally for 10 to 15 minutes. At times, my meditative sessions end up creating some anxiety or dullness. I'd like to get your perspective. Is this something common? What would I do different to have a steady introspective awareness? Okay. Well, Gunnar, or no, Rahul, sorry. Yeah, your question dovetails very nicely with Stefan's, because you describe yourself as being in about the same stages of practice. And was some of what I said in response to Stefan's question resonate with you?
I think so, but
Okay.
I kind of didn't hear it completely because I was
Because you're doing
writing.
that's
I was
fine.
writing up the question,
Yeah.
but I think I can elaborate a little bit more on this.
Sure. Go ahead.
I have a kind of anxiety-oriented personality, so the intention of my starting of meditation itself was to kind of have a to get down that anxiety. So when I started using TMI, I think I was able to get into the extrospective awareness pretty fast, like probably even less than a year. Like, but every time I try to get into stage 5 practice or stage 6 practice, even stage 5, I can hold on to. But every time I have tried to get into stage 6 practice, I have felt an overbearing burden of dullness hanging around me. So I always just go back down to stage 3 and stage 4, where I feel pretty comfortable. And, after the meditative sessions, I'm not anxious or in dullness. And this has been repeating over the years. Like, I think I have already went through 2 or 3 cycles of this. And, I really don't know how I can get that introspective, or is that the problem that I'm not having the introspective awareness? I'm not pretty sure what exactly am I missing.
So is it a problem? What? I didn't quite understand the last couple of words there.
Yeah, so my understanding from TMI is that the reason why I'm getting anxious due to in the sessions, or the reason why dullness is creeping in, is because the introspective awareness is not developed well enough. Uh, so I'm just wondering why, what should I do different, or what am I doing wrong?
Well, just before I respond directly to that question, I'd like to explore this anxiety that you're feeling a little bit more. Now, can you tell me more about it? Well, let's start off. Is the anxiety in any way a kind of anxiety based on the quality of your meditation and your expectations around it, or your aspirations around it? Or is that anxiety much more non-specific and is just sort of coming in as a result of the meditation? In other words, yeah, I guess, is the anxiety directly related to how well you're meditating, or how well you perceive yourself to be meditating? Or does it seem to have some other cause, and meditation just provides the conditions for that anxiety to arise? Are you clear what I'm asking there?
Yeah, that's clear.
Yeah.
So, what I would say is meditation always improves my default state of anxiety. But I have had meditative sessions where uh, once after the sit, I feel so much better than before the sit. So I think there is always uh, the need for me to kind of get to that state. So that also adds to some sort of anxiety, that if I don't get that perfect meditation going on,
Mhm.
uh,
Okay.
then that also creates some sort of, oh, that didn't go well kind of feeling.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that there's both. First of all, there's sort of a chronic underlying anxiety that tends to come up in meditation, but that anxiety then gets related to, because meditation relieves that, then there is now arising a sort of uh, need and desire have to be better at meditation so that you can be more free of this anxiety.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, great. All right. So what I would infer from what you say is that, yes, this anxiety is something that has been a problem for you, maybe not a huge overt problem, but to some degree or another a problem for a long time. It has something to do with the kinds of things that we would like to see get purified at stage 4 if possible, and will greatly facilitate your progress to the degree that you can, but it might not fully get dealt with until stage 7. So recognizing that is there, and that the fact that it's coming up in meditation is an opportunity, not to overcome it by somehow bypassing it through the meditation, which is very tempting, and which a lot of people come to meditation thinking this is how it's going to solve their problems. Like it's just going to magically make the problem go away. And it can seem to do that, but to permanently make it go away, it needs to be dealt with in a much more um, direct, and I'm tempted to say conscious, but with an appropriate. See, what consciousness does is brings much more of the mind system to bear on any particular uh, aspect of some part of the mind system, whatever it is generating this anxiety with you in a variety of conditions. So once gets to the place where in meditation it can emerge, the whole of the mind system has access to this and can begin working on it collectively and help those parts of the mind system that through conditioning, past emotional and psychological trauma, whatever has given rise to it. Well, psychological, emotional trauma as a result of could be physical trauma or anything else. Anyway, to be able to let this become integrated with the mind system as a whole, with who you are now, and who you aspire to become in the future. This is how this deep-seated anxiety will be dealt with in the most fruitful way. So it coming up in meditation is an opportunity. The fact that sometimes when you have a good meditation, that anxiety seems to be gone for a while, that's a promise. Okay, so you've got an opportunity and you've got a promise. And you're absolutely right. The key to this is an awareness that opens up and incorporates not just the anxiety, but to some degree or another, the roots of that anxiety and allows them to become more fully conscious. In awareness, we'll, as you see in the directions and for dealing with these sorts of things in stage 4, we'll use attention as a tool for dealing with these things. Okay, we will use attention as a tool to allow more of this to arise from the unconscious and become conscious, and also as a tool for approaching it in a much more healthy way, in an objective way, in an open way, with a willingness to understand and to learn and to grow from it, rather than a tendency to either identify with it or to push it away. Okay, we don't want to identify with it, we don't want to push it away, we want to be able to look at it, we want to see what it's telling us, we want to let the rest of the mind system speak back to the origins of that anxiety. Now, what will get in the way of this, although it's encouraging because it comes from the promise aspect of this, is you don't want to get attached to this idea that meditation is going to make this go away magically. In some cases, it will resolve itself without needing to be dealt with more extensively in a conscious manner. But I would not say, I would certainly not expect something, you seem to be describing something that has been with you for a long time and is fairly deep-seated. I doubt that that is going to ever quote, magically resolve itself. Nothing magically resolves itself, but it can perhaps be, some lesser things can be resolved at an unconscious level, and they just, ooh, they're suddenly in perspective and they're not a problem anymore. The emotional charge, the pain, whatever it is that goes with them is gone. Don't expect that of something of the magnitude that this seems to be. Is this all still sounding like it's accurate to you?
Yep.
Okay, good. Great. Can you work with the idea that this is both an opportunity and a promise? It's not an opportunity that you want to go out with a shovel and dig it out. It's like more like, have you ever seen a documentary of archaeologists or paleontologists uncovering something from the ground where their dig involves more brushes and little scrapers and things like that than it does shovels?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's more the kind of way that you want to approach this. More gently, more, encouragingly, whatever it is you are that's hidden beneath all this dirt and uh, come on, reveal yourself. Let's just make it an invitation, an encouragement, and a gentle brushing aside of the obscuring factors. As far as increasing your introspective awareness, this where what I was saying to Stefan is going to really apply to you. Just understanding a little more fully, or at least having a more accurate way of putting this is having a model of how your mind is working that helps you to understand more fully what's going on. This is going to be very helpful and very valuable in terms of allowing, encouraging, giving your mind incentive to develop more introspective awareness. So you can let the recognition of the roles that dullness or distraction play and how they come about and things like that. You can also let your understanding of what the purification process is about, what it does do and how it does it, and what it can't do, so that you approach it more reasonably. You see how that would work? Understanding informs intention. Intention guides the behavior of those unconscious parts of your mind system that give rise to your conscious experience.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Elizabeth, you're muted.
There we go. So again, one other possibility, sort of the same thing, is if you've got whatever degree you can do extrospective awareness while maintaining focus on your object, maybe even, if you're meditating with your eyes closed, put something nearby like a clock where you can actually hear the ticking, or if you're in a room where you can hear the refrigerator or some air conditioning or heater or something like that, or outside noises. Just really work on working with the object and maintaining that extrospective awareness, and having more of that extrospective awareness online, and then bringing to that a sense of equanimity, right? So there's equanimity with these external sounds that are arising. And then from there, mild distractions, any sense of emotional things that might be there, you can begin to have that same equanimity with the more internal things. Oh, there's this feeling of tension in my body. There's this physical sensation. There's mental talk of some sort going on. There's visual images that may be part, and they're flashing. Those, again, aren't necessarily becoming distractions that you mind wander on, but you can start noticing those things are there. Just like the sound in the external environment is there. And the idea is to have as much equanimity as you can. If anxiety or something like that is going on, then there are definitely going to be some sensations, right? There's sensations. Get to know where you feel that anxiety. Is it in your face? Is it in your chest? Is it in your hands? Where is that anxiety manifesting right now? What's going on with that? Oftentimes, there's sort of this interplay between mental talk, images, and the physical sensations. And so there's this dance that's going on. And again, at this point, you may want to just let that be happening in equanimity. And then some of the techniques where you turn the focus more to that mind stream, you can turn it in again, maybe start almost deconstructing it in more of a Shinzen Yang type thing. Right. But to really just work with the equanimity and getting to have that introspective awareness, part of it is, especially if there's an emotion attached to the thoughts and the talk and the images, it gets real easy to get glommed onto that thing. And that just increases the emotion. So part of it is having the equanimity to just let that thing be one more object that's arising in awareness. And then part of it is, if it's something that especially that has an emotional charge, you want to be able to pull those pieces apart and see that it's different, that there's these sensations in my body that are associated with emotion. There's this talk, there's this image going on. And if I can see them as separate things or as loosely connected things, it's not as much of something that's going to draw me in and just start some sort of a feedback loop that's going to wreck my meditation, as if I can just let them be separate.
Thank you.
Can you find a way to apply this practically, or
I think I can. So this is kind of where what I think it's similar to what I'm doing right now. I just try to take a step back always and look at what is happening.
Yeah.
Kind of what you are mentioning in checking in, right? So I try to do that and resolve this. Just a follow up on. So what I heard, if I heard it right, were you saying that this is probably, and it is probably coming up from something else, but do you think that meditation alone wouldn't suffice to understand this problem? Should I do something else?
actually, it would not be a bad idea if you are in a position to at all, uh, which hopefully you are, to get some sort of uh, therapeutic help as well. If especially the thing is, to work with a therapist, you need to have something to go to a therapist with, and the other challenge is finding the right therapist for you and for your particular situation. Uh, do you feel like you have at least some idea of what are the circumstances, the formative circumstances of your life that might be giving rise to this?
Not exactly.
No? Okay.
No.
At the point you're at right now, where it's just a kind of anxiety that's arising, it's not overwhelming. It's, I, I didn't get the impression that this is a major problem in your life. It's not disruptive to your life, but it's something that you'd certainly rather be free of. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right.
Okay. So go ahead and work with this in meditation until maybe it will begin to become clearer with you what the roots of this are in terms of the dynamics of the processes that made you the person you are today, who has this tendency that you'd like to be free of. If that becomes clear enough and doesn't get resolved actually in meditation through becoming clear of it, clear on it, then it would be appropriate. You would have something that you could go and talk to someone else about, and they could perhaps help you delve into it more deeply. But I think you need to have that first. If you were to go to someone and say, I have this sort of vague anxiety that comes up and is sometimes a problem, but not always. And then it's coming up in my meditation. Can you help me with it? They're not really going to know how to work with this. And they spend a lot of time fishing around and possibly jumping to mistaken conclusions. You don't want to waste your time with that. And you also have to find somebody that you're comfortable working with, which can be a challenge. So take your time on that as far as getting assistance with it, but be quite open to that. It may be something that can't be dealt with through meditation alone. And in that case, you'll want to take advantage of other resources.
Thank you, Culadasa. I appreciate it.
Good. Wonderful. Anything else? Any comments that anyone? Okay. Well, let's see. Here I saw Gunnar's question and then it's gone again. I don't understand.
He may have deleted it and since he couldn't attend today.
Oh, that would be unfortunate.
I don't see it either.
I see it.
Oh, you do? Would you like to?
But I don't know if I refresh the page, maybe I don't see it. Let me see.
Yeah.
Don't refresh the page first. Why don't you cut it and paste it into the chat?
Oh, actually I refreshed and it's still here. So cool. When you said don't refresh the page, I already had pressed the button. But anyway, it's still here. That's the good news. I cannot do that because I have Zoom on the phone and the question on the computer. So I don't know how I can do this. Well, I can just read it if you want, or
Sure. Yeah, if you don't mind, that would be good.
so it says, "Hi, Culadasa. Quote, the witness doesn't exist." Closing of the quote. What do you think? I'm coming to that conclusion. To that, sometimes I try to get to the place of the witness, but I seem to be automatically sprung back out of it. I'm left with a feeling of, I don't want to go back down there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It brings back memories of some bad trips I've had, where I would seem paralyzed, parenthesis, not physically, and my mind would spin in circles trying to make sense of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Where other non-meditators would just go with it. I guess identification with the witness and psychoactive drugs don't mix well. Would love to hear your opinion. Okay. Should I continue? There's a lot more.
Okay, well, maybe I should, I wish I could see it. I should probably deal with the first part again.
If you open it from the email, which is what I did, I opened just the post, not the page with all of the posts on them.
Oh,
just the page with the single post.
Okay.
So I wish I had a way to, but I can do that. Yes, maybe.
Well, let me try. Let me see if I can find it following your.
Can you just paste it again as a question? Will it use on the computer? Not into the Zoom session?
Let me see if this works. Give me one moment.
I've got it. I've got it.
Cool.
Wait a minute. I've got a different one.
So
dated November 9th. It says, when I meditate, sometimes my awareness goes off into memories and thoughts. So that's not the question. That's a different one.
I have the link now.
Okay.
I'm going to paste it here in the chat.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, there you go. That's the link to the post.
Great, I've got it. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm going to start it off with the witness doesn't exist. What do you think? I'm coming to that conclusion. And yes, that's good. You're halfway where you want to be with this. Okay. You recognize the witness doesn't exist, but there is something that has given rise to the illusion that there is a witness. In other words, there is something that you have mistaken for the witness previously, but you don't quite understand what that is yet. So the a sort of bad trip aspect of this is that, oh no, this is a really important thing, but all of a sudden I don't know what it is anymore. I don't understand it. That's the essence of a bad trip, right? Well, I don't know how familiar you are with using psychoactive substances, those of you who are listening, and what a bad trip is like, but that is the essence of a bad trip. You're having an experience that is just, there is nothing in your model of reality that this fits into. This threatens, it is something very important, whether it's the walls in the room dissolving or whatever it is. It's a major part of your reality. You can't afford to have it fall apart on you. It's disconcerting, to say the least, terrifying potentially, depending on how deeply you buy into the emotional reaction of it. And that's what makes it into the kind of negative experience it is. But the resolution of that comes through acceptance of, okay, it's not what I always thought it was. Let me not run away from it. Let me just be here with it until I can put it into some kind of new perspective that fits. And this is one of the cautions that you'll find there in TMI, is not to immediately cling to a new interpretation of this experience the way you have in a lifelong manner clung to your previous understanding, this feeling like there is someone in here who is watching this whole thing unfold. You know, you've already managed to let go of, there is something in here that's in control, pulling the levers and turning the wheels and stuff to make things happen. You realize that that's not the case anymore, but you're still left with this feeling, there's somebody that this is happening to. There is someone, something, some witness who is experiencing this. And you don't yet have something to replace that with. But this is the part, I think this is probably where our fear comes from, or why we get disconcerted and potentially terrified by something like this, is there is the fear that there is nothing corresponding to this. And if there's nothing corresponding to this, then what do you do? It's helpless. It's not just helpless, it's hopeless. That's helpless is disconcerting and terrifying. Hopeless is disconcerting and especially terrifying, right? Don't lose hope. But also don't feel like you'll necessarily ever completely understand what it is that this corresponds to, the ultimate truth of this experience. But you can find progressively clearer ways of understanding and interpreting this experience. That's the part that can allow you to accept, okay, it's not what I thought it was at all. What is it? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give you something to work with on this that might be helpful, but you have to come to your own place, not rely on what I say in my words, but you have to come to your own place of understanding what this is that you used to think of as the someone or something who is having this experience, who is the witness to this. So this is the clue that I want to give you in pursuing this. The perspective that is a part of this experience is associated in space and time with a particular point in space and time. It's moving through space and time. It's unfolding through space and time. But it is located in a particular place in space and time. That is the basis for the constructing of the witness. Now, of course, someday you may move to a perspective where you see beyond space and time. You see space and time as being an illusion as well. At that point, a new interpretation of your experience will be appropriate. Until you've reached that point, though, just say, okay, there's something happening in a particular location in space and time. And that's what I have constructed the idea of a witness, and previously had constructed more of a clear idea of a self-existent me who is always here. Bring into this spatial and temporal way of understanding what gives rise to this sense of a witness, and this conceptual construct of a witness. Bring into that everything is process, and that the perspective that arises in a particular place in space and time is the result of a confluence of many different processes coming together in that place and at that time, which then provides a particular perspective on whatever is, okay, that is available to you in the moment. Allow that to develop. Let that be an entryway into formulating your own new way of understanding this experience, but also don't attach to it. Recognize that as you grow further in insight and wisdom, that this will change yet again, but you never again will have to experience this as a bad trip. You'll experience it as a good trip, as a new doorway opening into a whole new way of understanding who you are, this world that you're a part of, and what your relationship is to it. So, I would go on to the second question, Gunnar's second question, after I give all of you an opportunity to say what you think about both Gunnar's question and what I've said in response to Gunnar. Guess no one has anything to say. All right. All right. Well, I hope you all will be able to find what I've said helpful at some time or another. Oh, great. Okay, well, let's go back to the rest of his question. Or his second question. When I'm meditating, sometimes my awareness goes off into memories or thoughts. And then there's a point when I come back, and there's this experience of selfless ego. Same thing happens when I'm waking up in the morning. There's now a very clear distinction between no ego moments and ego moments. What I've realized that there is suffering in these ego moments. And I was wondering where the suffering might come from. Does suffering appear because of the effort to try to create something permanent and stable out of something that is inherently ephemeral and empty? Yes, that's where the suffering comes from. And that's one of many ways of describing where the suffering comes from. To a much more well, let's see, scratch that. Just another way to think of this is that when we attach to a particular way of seeing things that may be functionally useful, but isn't real, then it will get us into trouble, because when we reify it in that way, we're going to apply it to situations where it's not functional. Your sense of self, and now when you use the word ego, I need to tell you that I respond to that based on my understanding of ego. And my understanding of ego is, oh, Gunnar has joined us. Oh, wow, wonderful. We're talking about your question right now, Gunnar.
Excellent. Hi, Culadasa.
Yeah. So talking about the second part of it right now, I'm sorry that you arrived late and couldn't hear what I said before, but maybe we'll figure out a way to deal with that in a moment. But as long as I'm talking about the second part, I'm talking about what you said about the experience of selfness and ego arising, and this happening also when you're waking up in the morning, and that you recognize that there's suffering in it, and where does the suffering come from? And it is, you could describe it as you have, as being due to the effort involved in trying to make something real and permanent out of something that is not real and is constantly changing. That's a very valid way of describing it. And I was just offering another way to think of it. Now, the concept of self is useful. You need to dress yourself, bathe yourself, feed yourself, look after your future bodily needs, so on and so forth. As a functional concept, that is useful. And the word ego, the way I like to think of the word ego, is a more specific conceptual construct. It's as if different parts of the mind system have made a list of I am. You know, you might do this. You might, I am. Well, I am a, and then put it whatever it is you do for your living. I am a man. I am a father. I am a son. I am a this. I am a that. I like this. I don't like that. I prefer this. I think this is harmful. You know, all of these things that provide a more detailed description of who we are. And this goes along with the sense of self as being something that's functionally useful. Okay. I am a blank and this is your profession. Well, I mean, this is a useful thing to have incorporated, associated with your sense of self functionally, right? So, and this goes for many other things. But the problem with reifying that, making it into something concrete, to attaching to it, is that then you'll tend to try to apply what is a functionally useful mental construct in certain contexts to every context. Because now you've made this self, this ego structure, some kind of fixed, permanent reality. And it's not. And it's always going to be difficult when you do that, because it's not going to work. And the consequences are going to be very real sorts of harm and suffering to yourself and to others, because you're acting out of an inappropriate set of assumptions. A set of assumptions that's useful in some circumstances, but not in all, right? And so that is what you're recognizing. To say that you're, you know, as some people seem to like to do, and I think seem to believe, is that this practice is going to make you egoless. Well, you can't be egoless and function in the world, but you can have a very, very healthy understanding of what ego is, what its purpose is, and what its function is. And it's like You don't use a hammer when you need a spatula to turn your eggs over. It's very difficult to flip your fried eggs with a hammer, right? So you don't even bother to pick up the hammer when you need to flip the eggs. That's a healthy relationship with your ego. That's a healthy relationship with the concept of self. It's a useful mental formation. It's a compact way of directing your behavior and your responses in some circumstances where it's appropriate. You won't become egoless. You won't, I suppose you could call this transcending the ego. I would call it transcending the illusory aspects of the ego and recognizing the practical ones. Right? I see you nodding your head.
Yes. Yes. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is a cause of suffering because anytime you attach to something in a world that is only process, in a world that consists of mental constructs attempting to describe a reality that really goes beyond what our human mind can encompass, then you're always going to trip over your own feet when that happens. And at some level, you begin to realize that even while you're doing it. And so you'll experience this suffering that arises out of just not recognizing this.
Yeah, and even the limits of language itself, right?
Yes, that's right.
Which we use, which in an attempt to use language to describe things that are beyond its realm.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because recently in my, well, I don't want to take too much of everyone's time here, but recently I've found myself more lost in meditation, not being able to explain or really understand what's going on and just letting it be.
Well, that was a lot of what I was saying in answer to your first question about the witness. You're right. The witness doesn't exist, but that's only half of it. There is something that the idea of a witness, which has always been intrinsically present in your perception and your perspective in the past, there is something that corresponds to, but it is not the witness the way that you have thought of it. It's not the someone or something that things are happening to and who observes these things, who experiences these things. It's not that. And I had suggested in that case that you at least begin by recognizing that you want to get to the second place of, okay, if it's not a witness, then what is it? And whatever you come up with, don't attach that as to being something, a final realization that you're going to reify and live by in the same way we just talked about with the ego and the self, because it's going to take you to a more sophisticated version of the same trap that you've been in before you ever started to practice, right?
Yeah.
But you can replace the witness with something that is more open, that reflects more insight and more understanding. And then as you acquire still more insight and still deeper understanding, then you'll be able, greater wisdom, you will be able to let this mental formation take on a new form. But from here on, it should always carry with it this openness that you've experienced as the first half of this. Whatever I think it is only my current best approximation of whatever truly corresponds to it. And you can listen to what I said earlier, but I think I'll just summarize it briefly now that you're here. There's a point in space and time from which your perspective arises. It's unique. So from the perspective of space and time, the witness, from that perspective, the witness is all of those causal processes that converge at that particular point in space and time and give rise to your perception of reality at that point. But these are all processes, and this is a confluence of processes. And this confluence moves through space and time, and the processes that converge upon it change as it moves through space and time. So this will give you the seeds for a way of understanding this that is no longer as limiting as the idea of this concrete witness, this, oh my God, there's always been something that this has been happening too, that these experiences. If that's not real, oh, what's that? Well, okay, I have this better, more accurate provisional understanding of what it is, and I won't hold on to that, but it can just serve to give me something so that it isn't a bad trip anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can. Yeah, that makes sense. And thanks. I'm going to watch the recording as well. And it's interesting how I feel like I'm always trying to grasp something and hold on to it so that I can analyze everything else from this point of view, right? Having one fixed point so I can observe the rest, right? And then recently, I was really making an effort. I wouldn't say effort, but I was looking for what in this whole experience of sitting was constant for our sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, funnily enough, that the only thing that was constant was change.
That's right. Isn't that beautiful in its simplicity, but amazing in its power?
And then the other day, I received a quote from a friend over WhatsApp on the internet from Rinpoche. It says anyway, the bad news is that you are on a free fall, but the good news is that there's no ground.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah. Right.
Well, great. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Yeah. Yeah, you can jump off the edge of the cliff, but then you discover that this is like flying, you know. Now you're a bird. Now you can land on different places, but none of them do you take to be as the ground. And none of them do you smash into.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking forward to getting some more confidence that I won't fall back.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I'm sure you realize, the biggest thing to fear is fear itself. If you can set that aside, then everything else will fall into place. In the Visuddhimagga, where Buddhaghosa discusses when somebody has had insight into impermanence, which is basically the only thing that's always there is change. When somebody's had that insight, what he describes as the knowledge of terror, and he says, does the meditator experience terror himself? No, he does not, but he understands the nature of terror, of fear, okay? He sees the danger in it. And so this is what you want to experience. It's not a bad trip, or it doesn't need to be a bad trip. I shouldn't say it's not. It is a bad trip until you discover that there's no ground, or you discover that you can fly, or whatever it is, however you want to put it, whatever analogy you want to draw. It is a bad trip until you discover that. But once you've discovered that, you realize that the only thing to fear is fear itself. And there is no cause for terror. But you know, and that's what Buddhaghosa was trying to communicate to us. Unfortunately, it wasn't subsequently that well understood. People assumed that you had to have a prolonged bad trip, and it's just not true. It can be as brief as a moment. That first moment of stepping off the edge of the cliff. Well, does anybody else would, let's just open it up to anything new or anything somebody would like to ask based on what we've talked about.
Well, if no one else has anything, I guess I do have a following question, which is, in this way of seeing things as being ephemeral, everything changes, change is constant. I do have a concern about losing grasp of meaning in terms of not being able to function, right?
Mm-hmm.
And getting into a kind of a nihilistic way of seeing life, right? And you think, and I guess I understand that might be one thing holding someone back from fully understanding or further wisdom, right?
Yeah.
But maybe you can say a few words to that.
Yeah. Well, that is the most real potential danger in this, is that with the undermining of the self and the idea of the witness, someone could just jump into that pit of nihilism, that there is nothing, since, this is like the logic of my pet is a dog and my dog is brown, therefore dogs are brown. That's not logical, right? But it's a pseudo logic. It's kind of a chop logic, that it's a linguistic logic that isn't true. But it's you don't need to fall into that kind of a trap that well, if my previous way of understanding reality is not valid, then there is no ultimate truth. There is no ultimate reality. That just, if that arises, just let it go. And there's two things that you can carry with you from that. One is that from now on, I'll regard whatever interpretation I put on reality as provisional, and that will allow me to continue to become up with more, potentially more accurate approximations of whatever is ultimate. And most especially, the more accurate the model that I have of reality is, the better I'll be able to use it. That's the functional part of it. Now, the problem with nihilism is it goes into, well, everything is pointless. Everything is useless. There's just no point in anything anymore. And that's not true. Just to, if that tends to come up at all, just, let go of that. That's just some primitive part of you wanting to, what is it they now say, that they've added a fourth thing to the fight. Anyway, the freeze aspect. And I've seen this with rodents. When a rodent is sufficiently threatened, they'll just die. You won't even wait to be killed by a predator. They'll just die. My son had some pet mice, and our cat got into the room where they were kept, and never got into the cage, but the mice died of fear, right? That's what nihilism does. It's that overreaction where you just give up on everything and essentially die to the world. You don't want to do that. you want to play your part in this unfolding of suchness. And whatever this ultimate reality is, you're a part of it. You are a confluence of all of these processes. You are an intrinsic part of this whole, whatever you is. That you can go down into the pit of nihilism, but there's absolutely no reason for it to. No reason at all. Yes, Elizabeth.
I mean, part of it, I think, at least for me, has been, yes, the self disappears, the self is ephemeral, but the self also re-arises. And so the things that I care about re-arise. The people that are meaningful to me, that care and that relationship re-arises. So, and the part of me that is aware there's no self and can get in the space of being okay with whatever is perfectly happy to work with the self that re-arises to act in the world. And so it can become a way to participate more fully rather than a way to withdraw into some sort of flatness and think nothing has any meaning. And that growing part that is okay with change and whatever's going on can be okay with whatever has to happen now because of the things the self cares about. And especially if it can let go of the way it was supposed to be and deal with, okay, yeah, but how does the self deal with what's happening right now? And so it can actually be a better thing, even though it's somewhat different. And I mean, that was that realization that both parts are there, that the self will re-arise and there are going to be things it cares about, things it wants to do, things that matter. And yes, that's ephemeral, but this other thing is an ally. And so they aren't enemies. Those two things work together in order to be able to be here in all of this.
I guess that's the thing, right? As it's kind of like you're telling me or asking me to have faith that new meaning will come, right? As we, in one point of view, we travel through time and through meaning, one could say. We let go of things of the past and new things come, right? But as I'm, let's say, learning to let these things go, I'm also anxious to make sure that the fear, right, that new meaning will come, right? Something will come and will replace.
I mean, let it be more that the self will disappear for a second, but get some confidence it's going to come back, right? And so it doesn't have to be, I let this go and something's going to happen in the future. It's no, the thing that's almost exactly like what you are right now is going to be here in 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay. And you can work for whatever it is you want now. It's just letting go of, it doesn't, I mean, if you look back, what I want now isn't what I wanted a year ago, isn't what I wanted 5 years ago. Things changed a little. But there are also threads that run through that, yeah, some of these things are very much the same. And so it's just holding it a little less tightly. It's not like it disappears and then there's a huge gulf and then someday there'll be new meaning. It's like, no, the things you care about now, you're probably going to care about tomorrow. And as things go on, you might have a slightly different perspective. But the things you care about, the things you want, this other part of you that can function more without grasping is perfectly happy to work with the self that re-arises, that wakes up and wants something. These are, and it's a dance to learn how they work together. But yeah, that fear is really, really normal, and eventually, I mean, it took me a long, long time to grasp that, oh, these are not enemies. I don't have to resist this letting go into whatever suchness or whatever, because the self will re-arise. And, it was actually realizing that part that was okay with everything was actually perfectly happy to work with, I had something concrete I wanted to work with, very specific. And it was very happy to do that. And it's like, oh, these are allies, that having to change some habits and to do things a different way, this thing that could be okay with that was an ally to this. Right. And so then it can also be an ally when I'm not trying something that's as drastic a change.
Right.
But then life's too easy. I mean, you don't have to do anything, right? It's too good to be true. I mean, that's what I wanted to say. It's too good to be true. I'm not saying it's too good to be true. I'm just saying it's marvelous that it's so.
Yeah, well, and we want to be able to interact in the world, right? So you don't necessarily really want to just be in that place where everything's okay and I don't have to do anything. Most of us want to be engaged in the world, which means we observe, and therefore we do want to interact with people. We do want to perhaps work for change in some areas. And so that means, that's a different, that means everything's, okay, but also everything isn't okay. And I somehow have to work with both. I have to let the part of me that says, no, this isn't okay, be real enough that the rest of me can work with that.
Yeah. That occurred to me a way of putting that, Elizabeth, is we don't want to be married to a particular way of being, but we want to be in relationship with the world nevertheless. Yeah. Yes, there is always something for you to do. There is intention, this is really, I think, what the Buddha was trying to communicate to us in saying that in referring to karma as intention and using the term rebirth. As Elizabeth said, the self is going to be reborn, because if you are going to engage in the world, there has to be a self. We just don't need to be attached to the form that self takes in the moment. What you do, if you're acting in the world, is going to have consequences in the world. And the motivations for what you do and how you do it are going to have consequences on the self that is reborn, right? In a subsequent moment of consciousness. So this is rebirth. And if you look at the links of dependent arising, what happens when you eliminate tanha, craving, and you eliminate clinging, then you have a different kind of process taking place. And that's really what we're after. Not falling into nihilism and not falling into, oh, well, I don't have to do anything at all. It's just, somehow it's all going to work out. Oh, the house is on fire. Well, I'll either burn up with it or somebody will come pull me out. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah.
So I guess the analogy or the explanation of what Buddha meant with resurrection, that's not the word you used.
Rebirth.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, that makes total sense. I never thought about it in that way.
Yeah. It's this. What is reborn is the self. And every time the self is reborn, it's different, but it's also what it is based on what it was and what it did the last time it arose in its last birth. So the idea of karma and reincarnation is a crude level at the mythical and magical of understanding of what is a very real process that's happening hour by hour, moment by moment. I mean, every day when you wake up, you described this experience in your post, that you wake up in the morning and the self is reborn. Every day is a new incarnation, right? And every night is a new entry into the Bardo state. Ricardo.
So if I understand correctly, so they also call them cycles of existence, I think, right? This rebirth.
Yeah. Right.
And you get many of them during a day. Like, I don't know, sometime in the day, maybe if you're unlucky, you might be tortured by someone, so you are in hell, but then you get reborn in another plane of existence, and you might need something, so you are reborn in the hungry ghost realm. Right. And so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And but what I understand is that so in theory, when you get to fourth path, you stop being reborn. So you kind of live in the bardo constantly.
Well, no, you're not living in the bardo. You're living beyond craving and clinging and reification of the self that gives rise to. Okay, so yeah, you've really overcome the need for clinging to the self is nothing more. I mean, the Buddha moved through the world. He did what he had to do on a daily basis, moment to moment basis. He responded to the situations that he was in, and he was in, as with all of us. There's no way you can continue living in this world without being constantly confronted by new situations that you have to respond to in one way or the other. And this was true of the Buddha as well. This is true of the Arhat. In terms of the 10 fetters, as a description of the passage through the 4 stages of awakening, to become an Arhat is to become completely free of craving and of attachment to even the sense of self, not just the ego concept, but this abiding sense that there is someone, something that this is happening to. So when that passes away, what you're left with is just what is functional in the moment and the flexibility of not clinging to that, allowing that to change. In other words, instead of coming into being as a temporary, but for that period of time, fixed reality, you're always transitional. Well, maybe you could say that you're always in the bardo, but the part of the bardo you're in, you're always in that point in the bardo where you're coming from the last existence and into the new one. You're never becoming a new fixed reality for a period of time. You're always in flux. The self doesn't need to be fixed and constant, even for the briefest unit of time.
So the sense of self is not reborn.
That's right. This with the Arhat, the sense of self is not reborn.
And in that sense, you live in the bardo, in the sense that there's no rebirth anymore of the sense of the self.
That's right. That's right.
And I imagine it's a much more continuous experience because there's not these breaks that you get reborn as different sense of self constantly. Yeah.
You truly become the process that you've always been, but now it's not in a kind of punctuated way. It's in a continuous flowing way.
Exactly. So before it's like clumps. I don't know, like you have one cycle of existence is like one clump, and then you get another one, and then you get another one.
Yeah. And if you attach to those and they're always changing, like I say, you're going to always be tripping over your feet.
Yeah, well, that's exactly, I think, what the Buddha said, right? The suffering comes from getting kind of, I don't know, getting yourself in the way of this process.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's interesting. It feels for me as if I had latency or like an internet like lag when connection is slow. And then as I meditate, it seems to speed up. I catch up with reality. That's literally the feeling. And it makes me, it's as if, or differently put, but also in technical terms, it's also as if the FPS, the frames per second, gets increased. And I was wondering, there's if that's something you can relate or anyone here can relate to in terms of whether it seems like there's an increased speed of reality, if it seems like reality speeds up, or quite the opposite, that it slows down because you can process it at a much faster rate.
Yes. It's as it really is both of those, isn't it? It's speeding, more frames per second, but it's also the same way as you speeding up, like your processing speeding up so much so that you no longer need to condense these all into some fixed frame before moving on to the next condensation. Can you imagine if your internet always had a lag, and you were always just catching up?
It's analog internet, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
It's
analog.
Not digital.
It's also not just temporal, but it could be spatial or the number of pixels, right? So one way of looking at these things is things arise and pass away, and others expansion, contraction, spatially. And so, walking around, there are times when all of a sudden it would seem like all of a sudden the world became IMAX as opposed to regular, right? And so there are different ways of looking at it. So temporal is one, spatial is one, depth, play with the range of this.
It's ultimately more information, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting.
Great. So it was a small group of us, but I think we had a good time this morning. All right. Well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks then. Hopefully we'll have more of our friends join us then. In the meantime, stay well, all of you. And may your practice continue to bear fruit.
Thank you. Be well.
Yes. Likewise. Thanks all.
Thank you.